live in a fairly small city here in Arizona. About 40 miles or so to the north is the city of Phoenix, and the Tonto National Park lies nearby. However, to the south, it's pretty much all desert as far as the eye can see. Many outdoorsy people opt to go hiking in the mountains of Tonto or along the Salt River near Roosevelt, but I much prefer the Sonoran Desert. There's something peaceful about being out there, and nothing beats rambling through the maze while listening to a horse with no name to relieve stress after a busy work week. But if there's one thing I've learned from hiking out there, it's to stick to the lowlands. People are hiding among the bluffs that you don't want to run into, and this is the story of my encounter with one of them that took place a few years ago. So, I'm a couple of hours into my hike, and it's unusually hot for the late afternoon. I'm starting to run out of water. I usually head back to my car when my canteen starts to run low, because, as you can imagine, it's not safe being out in the desert with no water. But I was in a real hiking mood, having more stress than usual to burn off. I honestly didn't feel like turning around just yet. Right as I'm deciding whether or not to call it a day, I see something shining from a hilltop not too far away. It looked like a little blinking light coming from my direct east. It took me a moment to realize it was a lens flare from a pair of binoculars. I figured it was another hiker, maybe even a group of them. If I asked nicely, I might be able to bum a little water off of them so I could continue my hike. So, I picked up the pace, winding through the cacti in the hopes that I could catch them on the hilltop. It's tough going, and I'm sweating like a turkey during the holiday season by the time I'm about halfway up the hill. But I'm determined to reach the top before they depart, imagining that I might be able to make some new hiking buddies in the process. But when I finally reach the top, there's no one to be found. The place was completely deserted. I take a look around, and still I don't see anyone. Yet, I do find evidence that someone had been there at some point, and recently too. I see all these gearboxes covered in some kind of camouflage material, canvas bags shoved into cracks in the boulders, solar panels sitting out in the sun, and even a kitchen with a stove set up under a rock overhang where there was a fire still burning. It was a full-on campsite on the top of that hill with a pretty commanding view of the surrounding area. Only, it was just a matter of minutes ago that I had seen the lens flare coming from what I assumed was this exact site. It was about then that I got this eerie feeling that I was being watched from somewhere. It didn't take long for me to discover how that feeling wasn't entirely without reason. "Manos arriba," someone said from behind me in a gruff but chillingly calm voice. I know enough Spanish to be able to recognize that this meant hands up. Punctuating those words was the unmistakable sound of someone locking and loading a gun of some description. "Por favor, no despairs," I said as I raised my trembling hands into the air. "Please don't shoot me." The person then said something else in Spanish, something I didn't understand. But the fact that they then pushed me down onto my knees clued me into their meaning. I thought that was it for me. You have no idea how easy it would have been for them to just shoot me there and then leave my body out in the desert for the vultures and coyotes. Had they done so, there's a good chance no one would have ever found me, not in one piece anyway. But instead of just straight up executing me, then, when they were happy I wasn't carrying any, they emptied my pockets of my wallet, phone, and car keys. "Pisha?" they asked suddenly, their words muffled, and I could tell without turning around that something was covering their face. "No, P-O-A, no esto P-O-A-I, said insistently, realizing that my life depended on them believing my response to their question. There was every chance they might just put a bullet in the back of my head. Better to be safe than sorry. But no bullet came. Instead, I heard them talking in Spanish again, something that was too fast for me to understand. I thought it was another question or statement directed at me until I heard someone's voice coming over a radio set, someone this person was communicating with. I strained my ears to try to pick up what they were saying, knowing that my safety probably depended on whatever report they were giving. But again, I could barely make out a word. It was a dumb thing to do, but I think my curiosity just got the better of me for a moment. I found myself turning slowly to try to get a look at the guy behind me. I only caught a little glimpse of the guy before he aimed his weapon at me and barked, "No, I'm Meyer. Don't look at me in my direction." But I vividly remember what he was wearing besides the ski mask that I had figured he was wearing. He had on full military garb, combat boots, khakis, a tactical vest that held spare magazines for his rifle, as well as what looked like smoke grenades attached to it. I had no idea what he was doing up there being so well equipped, but whatever it was, he meant business. The next thing I know, he throws my wallet, my water bottle, and my car keys down in front of me, then holds my driver's license up in front of my face. "You talk, you die," he says in broken English, before ordering me to my feet and dismissing me with a curt "Vamos." I did as I was told, utterly terrified that this mysterious gunman now knew my name and my home address, and would also be able to share such information with whoever his superiors were. Naturally, I had no intention of reporting him to the police, and I've never told a single soul this story until now. And I only do so under relative anonymity because when I got home from that hike, I did a little research on who the guy could have been. What I found terrified me. One of the first things I read online was an NBC article from 2011, which detailed how the Sinaloa cartel was sending scouts up into the hills around the Sonoran Desert to track the movement and activities of U.S. law enforcement. The article said that these cartel surveillance teams would camp up in the hills for sometimes 2 whole months at a time, and that there were thought to be 200 to 300 operatives working out there at any one time. They were even equipped with highly sophisticated military gear like night vision goggles and radio encryption equipment. I realized it was one of these guys that I had run into on my hike, and that I had been fortunate to have walked away without catching a bullet. If that guy had even suspected I was a DEA agent or something, and not some dumb hiker who was walking somewhere he shouldn't have been, I'd have had my bones picked clean by desert scavengers before the weekend was out. I won't lie. I know tough guy, and the whole experience most certainly put me off hiking around the desert for a while. It was frankly one of the most terrifying experiences of my entire life. My first time back was a little nerve-wracking, and I couldn't quite keep my eyes off the hills, just looking for that telltale glare from the binoculars of someone watching me. These days, I'm back to making it out there at least once a week. But I make a point of staying away from the hilltops because the next time I run into one of those scouts for the Sinaloa cartel, I might not be so lucky. I live in Las Cruces, New Mexico, right on the edge of the Chihuahuan Desert. About once a month, I and a few buddies of mine drive out to the Chihuahuan Desert Nature Park to drink Coronas and grill up some meat on a campfire. All but one of us are married with kids now, having put our wilder days behind us. So, getting out to the nature park every so often is pretty much the only time we get to hang out and escape the mundanity of family life. Don't get me wrong, I love my wife and kids, and am pretty happy in my career. But nothing beats hooking up with the boys for a few hours of beer and big boy talk. So, this one time, we're out there, sinking brews and complaining about the Cardinals with hot dogs and jerky, when I find myself needing to sneak off to take a piss. I find myself a collection of little shrubs to serve as an impromptu urinal then unsheath my pork sword and begin to relieve myself. I should note at this point that I'm wearing khaki shorts and boots, just so you can picture how this goes down. Right as I finish up, and I'm zipping my fly back up, I feel something tickling the hairs on my left leg. I look down, and a scorpion is crawling up my leg. Now, you should know I am terrified of spiders and scorpions like pee my pants scared. Anyone else might have just slapped the thing off their leg like a ninja, but I just freeze up completely, watching as the thing continues to crawl up my leg, using the hairs to get higher and higher until it's in danger of sneaking up the leg of my shorts. I had like one last chance to get that thing off me before it disappeared, and unfortunately for me, I simply could not summon the bravery to do so. So, I was forced to watch as that evil little bastard crawled up my shorts. And this next part is why I no longer wear boxer shorts and made a heavy investment in a bunch of snug-fitting trunks. In the aftermath of this nightmarish event, the scorpion doesn't stop when it's hidden away under my shorts, and I can feel it slowly but surely crawling up my thigh further and further until it reaches the loose opening of my underwear. Now, at this point, my buddies are calling out to me and making all kinds of dumb jokes about me jerking off over a particularly attractive wild pig. I wanted to tell them what was going on. Maybe they'd have been able to find a way to rescue me from a fate worse than death. But, like I said, I was just frozen in absolute terror as I felt that scorpion crawling into my underwear and dangerously close to my junk. By the time my buddy Jay walks over to see if I'm okay, I can feel the scorpion crawling over my manhood and balls. I try not to wince as I feel its sharp little legs digging into the sensitive flesh down there. It takes all my strength to just turn my head to face them. And immediately, they know something is wrong. I'm sweating. I'm pale. My hands are shaking, and I can barely talk. But I do manage to get out the words "scorpion" on my junk. Jay's all like, "What the hell did you say, dude? There's a scorpion on your junk for real?" All I can do in reply is nod. Jay runs back to the guys to tell them what's going on, having known from the look on my face that I was most definitely not kidding around. And immediately, they all rush over, which is when I notice that Jay has this big, gnarly stick in his hand that he starts holding like a Louisville Slugger as he gets close. I've never been so convinced of the existence of an ever-loving God than I was at that moment as I felt the scorpion crawl out the other side of my underwear and down my right thigh. Then, as it slowly emerged from the right side of my shorts, one of my buddies leaned in and smacked the thing off my leg in one swift, liberating flash of movement. I let out a full 5 minutes of terror and anxiety in the moments that followed, marching back up toward the fire in the cooler, screaming out every single expletive I had stowed away in my memory banks before downing like 2 full Coronas and cursing the fact that we didn't have the foresight to have packed anything stronger. Luckily, it didn't take long for us all to see the funny side, with my buddies making jokes about how a goddamn scorpion had gotten closer to my junk than my wife had in years. I have to admit, I laughed at that one, and the jokes helped break the tension and calm me down. But seriously, that was legitimately one of the scariest experiences of my entire life. I cannot even imagine the kind of pain I'd have been in if I had panicked and had that little monster sting my privates. And now, when we go out to the nature park for brews and boy talk, I always wear long pants. A few years ago, I took a break from my regular 9-to-5 job to go traveling around the world. It started with a nasty breakup with my girlfriend. I was fixated on it, like I literally couldn't get some of the thoughts out of my head, and I just needed to get away from everything that reminded me of her. So, I did what any person in a rut would do. I booked a ticket to Morocco and set off on an adventure. One of the most memorable experiences from that trip was when I ventured into the Sahara Desert. It was one of those things on my bucket list, and I figured it would be an excellent way to clear my head. I joined a tour group that promised an authentic desert experience, complete with camel rides and camping under the stars. As we trekked deeper into the dunes, the landscape changed drastically. The vastness of the desert was both breathtaking and humbling. I was fascinated by the sheer expanse of sand and how the dunes shifted with the wind, creating ripples that seemed to go on forever. Riding a camel was an experience in itself. Those creatures have an awkward grace about them, and as uncomfortable as it was at times, it was undeniably a unique way to traverse the desert. When we settled in for the night, the sky transformed into a canvas of stars. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. The stars seemed so close and vivid against the pitch-black backdrop of the desert night. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional whisper of the wind or the soft shuffle of camel feet in the distance. As we sat around the campfire, sharing stories and sipping tea, I felt a sense of tranquility that I hadn't experienced in a long time. It was therapeutic, being surrounded by such raw, untouched beauty, far removed from the chaos of my regular life. The next morning, watching the sunrise over the dunes was magical. The colors painted across the sky was surreal, a blend of fiery reds, soft oranges, and gentle yellows. It felt like a promise of new beginnings, a reminder that no matter how stuck I felt, there was always a new day on the horizon. That journey through the Sahara was a turning point for me. It gave me the clarity I needed and helped me embrace the idea of moving forward. Sometimes, all it takes is stepping into the unknown, into the vastness of nature, to find a sense of peace and renewal.